Before you begin fertility treatment, it's helpful to understand the natural menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle is regulated by a fascinating series of coordinated hormonal signals beginning in the brain. During each menstrual cycle, hormones from the brain cause an egg to develop and be released from the ovaries. Hormones from the ovaries cause the lining of the uterus to build up. If a pregnancy doesn't happen, the uterine lining sheds during the menstrual period. Then the cycle starts again. The menstrual cycle can be broken up into 4 phases: the menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulation phase, and luteal phase. The length of each phase can differ from person to person, and it can change over time. The menstrual phase begins with the first day of the period, day 1 of the cycle. Menstrual bleeding occurs in response to a drop in the ovarian hormones, estrogen and progesterone, that occur if a pregnancy hasn't taken place. The thickened uterine lining developed to support a pregnancy is no longer needed, so it sheds through the vagina. On average, the menstrual phase lasts for 3 to 7 days. The follicular phase overlaps with the menstrual phase. It begins on the first day of the period and ends with ovulation. In the brain, the hypothalamus sends a signal to the pituitary gland, causing it to release follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH. FSH stimulates ovarian follicles, which are small fluid-filled structures that each contain an immature egg. Several follicles will start maturing, but usually only one follicle will become dominant and release a mature egg each cycle. The rest of the follicles will degenerate and be reabsorbed. The maturing follicle produces estrogen that thickens the uterine lining, or endometrium, helping to prepare it for pregnancy. The normal follicular phase varies from about 10 to 21 days. Over a woman's reproductive life, the follicular phase tends to become shorter due to earlier follicle development and ovulation. The ovulation phase. At the end of the follicular phase, rising estrogen levels cause the pituitary gland to release a bolus of luteinizing hormone, or LH. This sudden spike in LH is called the LH surge. This triggers ovulation and is the hormone detected when you use a urine ovulation predictor kit. The LH surge will lead to the final maturation of the egg and cause the follicle to rupture and release a mature egg. The egg enters the fallopian tube, where it can be fertilized by sperm. The fertile window refers to a period of about 5 days, ending just after ovulation. The timing of ovulation varies from person to person and from cycle to cycle. Using a home ovulation predictor test can be useful for determining the time of ovulation. Once the egg is released, it remains viable for about 24 hours and then will degenerate if it hasn't fertilized. The luteal phase. After the follicle releases its egg, it becomes a corpus luteum. Under the influence of pituitary hormones, it will begin making progesterone. The main effect of progesterone is to transform the uterine lining to make it ready for a fertilized egg to implant. If the embryo does implant, cells from the embryo will produce human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. This is the hormone pregnancy tests detect. HCG stimulates the corpus luteum to continue producing progesterone and estrogen, which support the endometrium and the growing embryo. If the embryo does not implant, HCG is not produced, and the corpus luteum is no longer stimulated, and estrogen and progesterone levels fall. This causes the onset of the period, and a new cycle begins. The luteal phase is the most consistent phase of the menstrual cycle, usually lasting about 14 days. As you continue learning more about fertility care options, you will notice that the hormones the body produces during the menstrual cycle are used in fertility medications, and hormone levels can be tested to monitor the body's response. For instance, in an IVF cycle, increased quantities of FSH are given to increase the number of mature eggs that may be produced each month. Your care team is always available to answer any questions you may have about the interesting but complex physiology of your reproductive system.